Now we added more class-based views based on the template view. To be precise, the view for outputting our list of reviews and our single review. Now it turns out that these two use cases are so common, outputting a list of data, no matter if that's a list of blog posts or a list of products or whatever in a template, and outputting a single piece of data in a template. That's so common that Django has specific view classes for these scenarios to make that even easier for you and to help you write even less code. Now let's start with that review list view class. Whenever we have a scenario like this, that we have a template where we want to output a list of data, it will always look something like this. We define the template which we want to render, and then we add getContextData where we fetch all our items. In this case, through the review model, objects all. Now the model might differ, but the operation is pretty much always the same. We then set that data on the context and return the context. Therefore, since this is so common and often the same, Django has another specific view which you can import. And we import this from django.views.generic. So not generic.base, but just generic. From there, we can import the list view. Now this list view is a more specialized template view, if you want to call it like this. It's still all about rendering a template for a GET request, but it's then also specifically for fetching a list of data based on some model. So exactly what we're doing down there. So now we can change the reviews list view and not inherit from template view, but instead from list view. Once you do that, you can get rid of getContextData, and instead you should add a model property to this class, and that's new. Because now Django will fetch that data for you, but to do that it needs to know for which model it should fetch the data. So here, therefore, I set the model property and I set this to review, pointing at my review class, not instantiating the class, just pointing at it. Now, if we write def get here, we see that there are still a lot of methods we can override though. We can still override context data if we need to pass additional context to the template. We can override get ordering to control how the fetched data should be ordered. We can override get query set, which allows us to change how the data is fetched. So for example, if you want to get a filtered list or anything like this. We can add pagination with these extra methods. So we still can add methods here to get more controls. But if we want to get all the data, we have to do none of that. Instead, we just point at the model, we set up our template name, and we're good. And by default, Django will fetch all the data related to that model and pass it as context to this template. Now, if I save that and I try to go to /reviews, this will fail though. I get an empty page. And the reason for this is that Django will fetch me all those reviews, but it will expose them in my template not named as reviews, but as object list. So if I use object list here instead of reviews, I can keep review here, but this has to be object list. If I do that and reload reviews, it works again. Now, of course, maybe we don't want to use object list though, because that's very unspecific. Reviews definitely was better. And you can do that because as basically all those built-in features Django offers to you, you can configure how this list view works. You can add a context object name property, which allows you to define the name of the data which it will have when it's exposed to your template. So if I set this to reviews here, I can use that fetched list of data under the name reviews in my template. So now I can have reviews in the template because of this extra property which is set here. If I now reload, it still works. And just to come back to these methods which you can override, if you, for example, want to only render the reviews with a rating greater than 4, so only the reviews with a rating of 5, then you can override this getQuerySet method here. This should return a query set. And what we can do here is we can get our base query, or however you want to name it, by calling super getQuerySet. And then on that query, you can call all those query methods you learned about earlier in the course, like filter, because you learned that you can chain queries after each other. You can chain those query set methods after each other. And the full query will only be executed once the data is really used then. So here we could then filter and filter for rating being greater than 4. And you learned about this syntax earlier in the course. Now we can store this in a new variable and return that variable in getQuerySet. And now if we save this and reload, we have our filtered list here. So you still have full control over how data is fetched, but you don't need to write all the boilerplate around that. You can really focus on defining the template, the model, maybe adjust the querying logic if you need to, and you're good. You don't need to add a get method where you then write every step on your own. Instead, you can use the list view to do a lot of that for you. And if you don't need to narrow down the query, you can even omit that, of course, and you have an even leaner view. And in this case, that is what I want, because I want to show all ratings here.